Hey folks, Eshan here with another segment of mental health, spiritual practice, and self-care coming from you from All Wise Transformation. And I have an awesome guest with me today, Shoshana, who is an activist who lives in intentional community and whose goal is to create more widespread intentional community, either in saving the planet, whatever that looks like, from financial to recycling. Shoshana, can you introduce yourself?
Hey fam, my name is Shoshana. I use they or she pronouns, and I'm excited to be here today and looking forward to this conversation.
Yay! Oh, thank you so much for joining me. Um, I met Shoshana at this concert that a really good friend of mine was doing, and I was being a wallflower, and Shoshana just comes up to me and is like, "What's your name?" And I'm like, "I'm Eshin. Who are you?"
True Sagittarius form. I'm just not gonna let anybody be a wallflower around here. If I have to socialize, everybody has to socialize, okay?
I love it. I love it. And I was just sort of like in the corner, just like watching everybody. I was on my phone, and Shoshana just came over and was like, "Hey," and we started
Mhm.
talking about a whole bunch of things, and I just really connected with you, and that was really sweet. That you sort of opened up that invitation for me.
Yeah, it was good energy. It was good energy for sure.
So I always like to start off with, Shoshana, what are you curious about these days?
Ooh, wow. I have a lot of curiosities. Um, I'm curious about how I will be remembered. I'm curious about if the frost date in Western Massachusetts will continue getting pushed back. It's May 6th this year. Like that feels late. I'm like, dang, it's cold for so long. So I'm curious about our planet and how our planet will heal herself despite all of our efforts. To the contrary. I'm curious also about what's happening right now in our federal government, and I have curiosity about what it will lead to. Um, I'm curious about my hesitation and cautiousness around um, the way that our federal government is being destroyed, and also how that may create space or room for revolutionaries to create new systems that actually work for the people.
Mm,
And at what point we can uh, slice right into the middle of what's happening, um, and build another world.
mm,
I'm curious about the stories of regular people in Rome during the fall of the Roman Empire.
mm.
Like when the Roman Empire fell, there were like regular people like me and you who were who were not rich and were not like
Yeah,
differently impacted,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
we were they not everybody was just having this whole moment. Like some people were just living a regular life.
Right.
And
Yeah.
how did the fall of the Roman Empire impact them?
Yeah.
Like, how did they go on living a regular life? Because I'm curious about that for myself right now,
Mhm.
as I feel like this intimate parallel. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, there is something about history and what our ancestors lived through and how they sort of survived. Because technically we are the strength of our ancestors. Like we are the ones that made it, right? Compared to the ones that did it, right? So we are sort of like that super community that has leaped forward. And I'm curious about like what you said, like how were they living? Like how
Mhm.
were they loving? And how were they sort of pushing back against the system that didn't necessarily recognize them?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm cautious also of um looking to the past with rose-colored glasses.
Mm. Mm.
And being like, uh, so one of the ways that that happens in movement spaces, or there was like a good run of this for a little while of people wearing t-shirts or sweatshirts that's like, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. And I'd be like, but I'm also my ancestors' scariest nightmares. Like I'm
Mm.
actually terrifying for some of like some of my ancestors are terrified of me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and holding that truth too of like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that. Um, or like we are the descendants of survivors, and
Mm.
that in some ways feels great, but also feels like um I was listening recently to this uh interview about resilience and people talking about like when people say you are resilient, it sounds nice, but when you're being resilient, it feels really bad. Like, it's actually not a great thing. Like, I don't want to be resilient, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about that in the same context of like, yeah, we are the children of survivors, of people who have chosen to survive and chosen to do what was needed in that moment to stay alive, and also what were those choices? And I've been thinking about that deeply because I do anti-Semitism education. And my work in the world right now, how I pay my bills is to talk to revolutionaries, progressives, liberals about taking anti-Semitism seriously and also not allowing it to get in the way of our work of building another world, like to not allow it to distract us or to fracture our movements, to not allow anti-Semitism to be the excuse that gets Claudine Gay fired, to not
Mm.
allow
Mm.
anti-Semitism
Mm.
to be the thing that allows the destruction of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, right? How do we both take it seriously and also um, understand what it's doing? And I one of the things that I teach about is sort of how that relates to Zionism, right? And anti-Zionism and all of those kinds of politics. And recently I was in a conversation and it's like, oh, yeah, our ancestors have always had multiple strategies for staying safe. And some of them were ethno nationalism. Some of them were actually communism and building an inclusive labor movement,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And reckoning with the truth that those who were building the labor movement all got murdered.
Mhm.
So just because we survived doesn't mean that are the people who chose to survive or who were able to survive um, have the right politics or have the best wisdom
Right.
about building the world that we want to see.
Right. Right.
Um, so I'm cautious around that, but I'm also like, yeah, and we survived, and I want to be a survivor,
Yeah.
but also that, right? Like,
Yeah.
man, I don't want to be a survivor. I just want to live my life. can we just live, not survive?
Oh
Can
my
we
God, that would be
thrive?
so lovely, right? Just that would be so lovely. I just want to be in my garden. I just want to like sip my tea and watch the sunset, right? That's all I want to do. That's all I
Right.
want to do.
Yeah, just have a good laugh with a friend, read a book.
For fun, not for like education or, for my mental health. This is just for fun.
Right.
So for the folks who don't know what you do, what do you do?
Yeah, I am a healer, organizer, educator. Um, I play in many realms. Um, I was raised up also as a dancer, so I have a background in African dance here in New York City, specifically Senegalese African dance, Sabar, and I right now I am the director of pedagogy and training for an international organization fighting anti-Semitism called Diaspora Alliance. I'm also a Kohenet, which is a Hebrew priestess. So I am ordained in an earth-based feminist orientation to
Mm,
Jewish ritual practice,
mm,
and reclaiming the rightful role of women in Jewish ritual.
mm,
Um, and yeah, and I've been doing healing. I've trained. My education is in social work. So the way that I often describe my career path or life journey has been that I am really interested in abolishing prisons. And
mm,
so a lot of jobs that I take relate either to the crib to prison pipeline, right? All the starting at child welfare and hospitals and mandated reporting, all the way to reentry programs and syringe exchanges
mm.
and harm reduction. Um, and and then there's me. And I think I'm doing more of a job around me right now, which is me as a Black, Jewish, queer femme person, and seeing how fascism is on the rise and being like, oh, I have something to offer right now around how we think about stopping fascism and how we think about who Jewish people are, what Jewish people need, as that often comes up as an excuse for a fascist agenda for building a quote unquote Riviera in the Middle East, right? For the alignment of Trump with Netanyahu and Putin, right? And sort of like, what does that all mean? And I think as a Black Jewish person raised in New York City, I have something to say about that. So that's what I do. And then I spend a lot of my time hanging out in Western Massachusetts at Cabilio, building community and seeding. So on one hand, I'm doing all this work to fight back the system, and fight back fascism. And on the other hand, I'm literally planting seeds in the ground to grow a different type of world. And so I spend time in Western Massachusetts building intentional community and farming and connecting with Black queer folk up there and Jewish folks and
So
anybody who
for folks
cares.
who don't know Kabilia, like
Mhm.
how did you get involved in that, and like what drew you to the idea of being involved in intentional community?
Yeah. Well, I met Uh, I met some of the members. I first met some of the members and first started having conversations about intentional community in 2019 at at a conference called Decolonizing Your Heart, Minds, and Movements. And at that conference, a Black caucus came together and started talking, and the conversations led to intentional community. And before that, I hadn't thought at all about intentional community, but I had thought about land. And as a third generation New Yorker, like, my father was I was born in the same hospital that my father was born and died in. And on my mother's side, her mother and father were also um here, right? Like born here in New York City. So I feel deeply connected to New York in a way that most people don't. Like I'm really from here.
Yeah, yeah,
And you know, Malcolm X says revolution is based on land. All revolution is based on land.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and the more that I got politicized and the more that I understood about capitalism and the type of society that we lived in, the more that I understood that we would never be free unless we could understand the source of our food.
Mm, mm, mm,
Unless unless we have direct access with
mm,
our food source,
mhm,
liberation is not gonna be real.
mhm.
And I think that that looks multiple different ways. That doesn't necessarily mean that people have to leave the city. But for me, it meant how do I cultivate a relationship with land?
Mm,
Um, and how do I cultivate a relationship with people who also want to tend that land and think
yeah.
about what that means and be in conversation um and create refuge, create space to get away. And the more that I navigated through climate catastrophe, through watching Hurricane Katrina and then navigating Hurricane Sandy, and then navigating the COVID-19 pandemic,
Mhm.
the more I understood. Oh, and then also just being an activist and an organizer and being heavy in these streets. Like,
Yeah.
I'm in these streets in New York City, okay? Like, I'll be outside. And so, the Black Lives Matter movement and just sort of all of the uprisings that have continued to happen, um, really in my memory since 2012, but even before that, organizing around prisons, around parole reform,
Mhm.
um, all of that really culminated in me being like, oh, I need a balance. I can't be in the city steadily.
Right.
I need I need space and then come back.
Yeah.
I need to go and leave and come back. I
Yeah.
love New York City, but also I need some quiet sometimes. I need to put my hands in dirt that, you know, I'm not scared of a rat popping out of a hole somewhere. Like that's real.
That's no, it's real. It's real.
And I didn't really have deep connection to community gardens here. And there are community gardens in my neighborhood all around. There's a few of them, but I don't have deep connection to them. And I want to learn to grow my own food. And I was introduced originally to Soul Fire Farm in 2011,
Is that
maybe.
is that is that in Vermont? Soul Fire?
Soul Fire Farm is in New York,
New York. Okay.
a little bit north of Albany.
Okay.
And when I got introduced to Soul Fire Farm, they were a baby farm off the grid. Nobody knew about them. And I mean, not nobody, but
Right.
they were a
Right. Yeah.
really small family operation. And now they're enormous. They have a full staff and they have a nonprofit, and they run a CSA, and they run an institute, and they do all these trainings and fellowships and writing books and all the things. And it's really beautiful. But they were the first ones that really made that connection for me, because we would have our prison abolition retreats for organizers across the state,
Yeah.
coming together to do prison abolition, and we would have our retreats at their farm.
Mm-hmm.
And there was just such clarity around prison abolition, and access to land, and black land, right, and black land ownership,
Mm-hmm.
and the interconnectedness of those struggles was just so sharp and clear and crisp. And that was really the beginnings of my desires for being a farmer, or being interested in farming, or being interested in stewarding land. And then I'm here.
Yay! And I've been up to Cabrillo, and it's beautiful. Well, I should say from the at nighttime, because when I was out there, it was pretty dark, and but from what I could see, it's a beautiful property.
Yeah, we it is really it's really healing and life-giving and special. And I'm hoping that you can come up, come down. Uh,
Yay!
when we have our farm days, and when it's nice outside and we can go frolicking.
I heard that you showed what was it, a documentary, and I wasn't able to make it because I was not feeling well. I was fighting the flu, and I'm sort of just now getting over that. And how did that filming go? How did that what can you say a little bit more about it? Because I
Yeah.
heard the discussion afterwards was very beautiful and very
It was
inspiring.
bomb. It was
Yeah.
bomb. So shout out to Maulisa, our mutual friends. Because we had Kwanzaa. We celebrate Kwanzaa, and we had our Kwanzaa celebration. And at that celebration, we begun talking just about how do we begin to get ourselves off of this oppressive, life support machine of capitalism. And what do we do? And I think we had started talking about it because of internet, and living in rural spaces, rural places,
Mhm.
or not so rural, suburban or rural,
Yeah.
where internet is spotty. And what are options? Uh, okay, well, the other option, if we don't want, the regular one, is to go to Space Link and do satellite. And then it's like, well, that's Elon Musk. We know what he's doing to the government. Do we really want to like give him all our data? Like everything you search on the internet, everything you stream, everything you watch? Like, do
Yeah.
you really want him to have all that? Like you see what he's trying to do.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And so Ma Lisa has said that had brought to our attention this documentary called By Now. And we watched it together and then had a conversation. And yeah, it was like really beautiful to be able to be in dialogue around that with Black folks that are building shared community in the Northeast. And what does that mean? How do we make different choices? How, like, what are the things that we're struggling around? How do we navigate that, right? Like, how do we navigate our addictions to consumerism? How do we navigate, like, okay, it's not an addiction to consumerism, but like I like to look cute, or like I'm about to go to this Beyonce concert. So yeah, I need me some new boots. Like I need some cowboy boots. Okay. I got lots of boots, but I ain't got no cowboy boots. Okay. And it's about to be Cowboy Carter out here. So
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and how do we reckon with that? Right? Like what do we do with that? And it was
Yeah.
good to be in shared conversation around that, and around concepts of just procurement, and being aware of where we're buying things. Concepts of how do we build bigger communities so that we can have swaps. And like, okay, you like new clothes. Me too. So let's swap clothes instead of buying and having it lands in all of these terrible places and what happens to fast fashion and all of that. So, just having more opportunities to be in conversation with like-minded folks around these concepts just helps to build a community that strengthens our muscles
Right.
and also provides solace for understanding that we can be thinking about these things on our own and watching these things on our own, and it feels really hard and almost impossible.
Mhm.
And it feels a little bit more possible when you have community around and you have community to commiserate with and community that understands and has your back and also is in that same struggle with you.
And I think that's the magic of capitalism, right? It doesn't give you a sense, or it doesn't give you any indication of where your product comes from the minerals in the technology that we use, from the materials that we use for our clothes, to the things that we use to build our homes or to build that deck that you want to build. So the as great as capitalism is, it's literally set up on in a way where we don't know. So there's that first part. We don't know where the stuff comes from, right? And then the waste that we have from those things that we buy, from the packaging to the plastic, to the boxes, to the advertisement on the box, right? So all of that stuff gets thrown out. And like I had like two laptops that I sort of cleared, and I was trying to donate, and I sort of donated. And in the past, I would have thrown it out, but there was sort of like this exchange program, and I was like, I'm just going to clear my hard drive, and I'm just going to donate it, right? To because it still was good, two laptops, still good. It's just you just had to update it, and so I don't know if folks are having that conversation, and I do agree with you. There's something about being in community that really makes you more intentional in not only how you're moving through the products that you're buying, because face it, like we're sort of in the system, and until we're able to sort of detach from the system in a very sort of mindful way, it's really difficult. And I'm curious about how you sort of think about that or conceptualize that, or how you have conversations about that.
Yeah. I mean, you're saying exactly what we started with, which was what led me to my interest in being an intentional community. And I was like, because I want to know we won't be free until we know where our food comes from,
Yeah.
right? And so same thing, like we don't know where all of our materials come from. I'm thinking even about uh you were saying minerals in the computers, but I'm thinking about, even these healing minerals. Like here I have a rose quartz, here I have an amethyst, right? And I
Yeah.
go to these stores and it tells me what the name of it is. It tells me about the properties, but it doesn't tell me like where did they source this one specifically from,
Right. Right.
And there's so much in these um yeah, in sourcing materials and particularly minerals from the earth. There's so much harm and damage to people of color, to the global south.
Mhm.
And that's what we talked about during the movie. And this movie really like it goes into it about sort of capitalism's um relinquishing of responsibility for afterlife.
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't talk about this in the movie debrief, but it's coming to me now to say something about it mirrors our own, our societies, as manifested by all of us,
Right.
death phobia.
Mm, mm,
And
mm.
including like, it's including like, well, I Apple is not responsible for what happens after the phone is sold. Not responsible.
Right.
Don't care, like after it's out of warranty, you are not, they, one company had to go to the Supreme Court to even get, repair manuals because they don't publish repair manuals anymore.
Mm.
Because they don't want you to fix anything, because they just want you to buy something new and throw the old thing away. But
Right.
where is away?
Right. Right.
And away is the same thing that we do with our elders when we put
Mm.
them away in an aging home.
Yeah.
It's the same thing we do with our people who have caused harm when we send them away
Right.
to prison.
Right.
It's the same thing we do with people who are suffering and navigating addiction
Yeah.
or mental health, right? We put them away. And where is this magical away that it solves all of our problems? It's the same idea of being death phobic, of not dealing with the end,
Yeah.
of just perpetually putting it off.
Right.
And so that brings me to this idea in a book, and it's gonna relate back to Cabilio. I'm getting there. Follow me for a
No,
second.
yeah. Yeah. No, I'm loving
Taking
it.
you,
I
taking you in a circuit.
I love the journey. Take me on the journey.
I was reading this book called Die Wise, and it's a really wonderful book. One of my spiritual teachers teaches a course on it, and it's a really powerful book. And one of the things that he says is he talks about what is home, and he talks about the way in which home for indigenous communities is different than home uh, for other peoples. And one of the reasons is because in indigenous communities, there's a cycle connected to the earth, which is that they know where their ancestors' bones are buried, and those bones are buried in the same soil that grow their food, that nourish their body.
Mm,
And
mm,
so there's this intimate connection, and cycle of through generations, through ancestors, that serves as a different orientation for what we think about death,
mm,
and what we think about home,
mm,
and
mm,
the way in which in our society, if you're dying, you go away to a hospital, and I'll speak from my own experience. When my dad passed, he was in a hospital, and they called me and said he passed. And by the time I got to the hospital, he was already gone to the morgue.
mm, mm.
And so I never saw him dead.
Right.
I never saw his body dead. From the morgue, he went to the crematorium, and the crematorium delivered him to my house in his ashes, right?
Mm, mm,
So there's this way in which we don't have that connection, and that severs us from home.
yeah.
And I think what I'm trying to do at Cabilio is build home.
Mm,
And
mm,
so many of us don't have that connection, not because we don't want it, but because it was stolen from us. And but for me, on both sides, right? On my dad's side, stolen. Like, I don't know where my family's from, right? They were running. My grandmother came north through the Great Migration. Like,
mm.
they were escaping slavery and all of this stuff. So it's that part.
Right.
And on the other side, it's like my mother's family was fleeing pogroms, and intense violent riots and persecution, and coming here. And so there's a way in which like yeah, it's hard to figure out where are the bones of my people and how do I connect with where that is. And I think that's what I'm looking for in Kabilio is like where is the place where we can have home and build life cycles wherein people feel settled
Yeah.
and at home.
There, you sort of triggered this memory of mine. So I came to the States when I was about three. So I'm from Haiti. My family is from there, and this was like back in maybe 2010, maybe 2009. I went back for the first time with my mom. My mom was doing some missionary work, and I'm trying to remember the countryside my dad's from. So we visited my father's family side of the family, um, and there's this whole countryside of Lacosses. And the one thing that really stood out to me was, poor area, folks living in shacks, and behind each shack or each home was a memorial. Like it was a family sort of plot that family members were buried there, and so there was farmland and there were connections literally in your backyard of family members that were passed away. And something about what you said, that it it gives you a sense of history, it gives you a sense of connection not only to the land but to the people who care for the land. And there was something that was very humbling, very beautiful, also scary, because it's one of those things. It's like, oh, in your backyard there's a mausoleum of like my great great grandmother, and
But is it scary? Is it scary for them though, or is it just scary
no,
for you having grown up in this
yeah,
death phobic culture?
yes, 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 yes. For them it's normal, right? You know, doing their thing, and it's just. But for me, the idea of just like, and the thing that really struck me. So I was visiting my great aunt, up in the countryside, and she has a farm, and we were getting ready for I think it was dinner, because we had gotten there pretty late, and she's like, "Hey, come in the back of the house," and I was like, "Okay, sure," and she's like, "Pick one," and I'm like, "Pick what?" And there was nothing but chickens. She's like, "We're gonna have dinner, so just pick one," and it was just the casualness of it that was just like, "What? You just want me to just pick a chicken?" And literally maybe like 2 hours later we were eating that chicken, the very
Best
chicken.
chicken you ever had.
No lie, best chicken I ever had. And I saw the whole process, from
Mhm.
the grabbing of the chicken to the breaking of the neck to the deep plucking the feathers off of it, to boiling it, to season it, and then cooking it, and then on my plate. The whole process was in front of me, and that in itself was very humbling, and it was a little off-putting. I'm not gonna lie. Living in the United States for as long as I have, and it was off-putting, but I respected it. I respected that whole process. And you're right, there is this sort of not only disconnection from the death process, but disconnection from the tradition of having, caring for that process, the ritual around it, or the steps around it, right?
Yeah, yeah. It has the commodification of these processes, right? Just weaving in the capitalism analysis here. It's like, yeah, because in we have laws that say that have to you have to go to a funeral home. Like you have to have certain licensed people that touch the body or do whatever needs to be done to the body. That you can't just be like, that's my dad and I'm gonna just take care of this thing. Like, and also then it removes knowledge from our communities
Yeah. Yeah.
about how we care for our dead.
Right.
And that is a spiritual starvation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because that's part of a spiritual practice is how we care for the dead, how we mourn the dead, right? And all of this gets consumed by capitalism that says you only have 3 days before you have to go back to work.
Yeah.
What? I'm sorry, no. Like
It's mind blowing.
I couldn't have been more when my father passed away, I couldn't have been more grateful to be Jewish and be like, I'm sorry, we sit Shiva for 7 days, you know? Or, like I
In some places,
remember
it's
thinking,
longer. In some cultures, it's longer than just 7 days.
yeah, yeah. And I
That
remember
grieving
thinking
process.
how I couldn't have imagined losing my father. And he didn't die from COVID, but he died during the pandemic. And I couldn't have imagined what it would have meant to have that experience before the pandemic when I would have had to be forced to go back to work. But that year I had the remote working,
Yeah.
like not excuse, but the accommodation. Um, and I remember like, just I still to this day, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I can't imagine have not being able to have been afforded months
Mhm.
to come back into what feels like a rhythm that um somewhat aligns with the capitalist grind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it really is capitalism really is starving us spiritual of our spirituality, of our spiritual practices
Mhm.
and wisdom. Also, of our skills, um, and our knowledge.
Mhm. Mhm. Can you say a little bit more about your spiritual practice? Because you're also a priestess, if I'm using that correctly, and what that looks like, and how do you hold space for that?
Yeah. Yeah, so I was raised Orthodox Jewish. And also in the Bronx. And so for me that means that my white Jewish mom was also going to botanicas and getting 7 day candles blessed up, and cleansing her crystals in cups of salt, and having an altar practice. And I didn't quite understand that, but I knew that that wasn't something to be talked about in Orthodox Jewish spaces. I knew that that practice was not Jewish per se, um, but I didn't know what it was really, honestly. It just felt right. I was like, oh yeah, mom. Like,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
You
We're
know?
gonna be cleansing our crystals tonight.
Right. Right. Um, and so that's sort of like that's the home that I grew up in, was like lighting Shabbos candles and going to the Botanica. And also going to Senegalese African dance class, um, where a spirituality called Ndip was practiced. Um, and so I had all these like things, and I was Jewish. And In the Jewish community now it's a little bit more common, but when I was younger, particularly because I was raised in Orthodox Jewish spaces, there was like real strictness around what is Jewish and what is not Jewish. Um, and so I learned to sort of compartmentalize these things. And I also remember learning to talk about them as like, that's a spiritual practice, but my religion is Judaism.
Mhm.
But I do other spiritual things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I went to Kohenet, Hebrew Priestess Institute, to figure out how to talk about why or how I do all these things and that they're not actually uh, contradictory.
Mm, mm,
And the language that I developed to talk about it is spiritual multiplicity.
mm,
And spiritual multiplicity comes in contrast to um, spiritual synchronicity. Most people are familiar with synchronous religions,
sort of like
like
side by side, you mean?
Santeria, Condomble, Hoodoo, Voodoo. I the ways in which you might be worshiping Obatala, but saying the word Jesus.
Oh, okay.
All right. Synchronicity is about comes from the ways in which slaves hid African
Mm,
spiritual traditions and spiritual beliefs inside of a forced Christianity.
mhm,
And so I, take issue with that language of synchronicity because for me, I don't practice candomblé or santeria. Um, I have been in many ceremonies and rituals within those spiritual traditions, but th- that is not my orientation. My orientation is not about hiding. It is about
mm,
being clear that I am honoring a
mm,
multiplicitous lineage as
mm,
a Black Jew, that I have lineages that have honored and practiced multiple spiritual ritual practices
mhm,
from different places. And that actually, those practices are not in competition with each other and they don't cancel each other out, that they actually exist harmoniously. And that's sort of how I talk about my spiritual practice, is again, spiritual multiplicity.
mhm,
And so, yes, I um am a Kohenet and ordained and daven and have a very rich Jewish practice that is also integrated into a beautiful altar practice and also integrated with in-depth spiritual practices and earth-based indigenous understandings of interconnection with spirit and earth,
mhm,
and that actually all of that is can easily be found in Jewish lineage, not the patriarchal, conservative, strict Jewish lineage that I was raised in. But that is a lineage that again is oppressive for me, um, and has too many dynamics of patriarchy and repression. And when I pull that back and I look for where was the feminism, what was the what was the earth reverence practice, I so easily found in Jewish practice. And so what I'm out to do is honor that, honor the ways in which people can hold multiple spiritual practices, honor Jews of color, particularly queer Jews of color who are
Do,
making sense of their life.
do you know if there was a particular moment or situation that said Kahana was for you? Because I know for me, growing up in the Baptist tradition, sort of Catholic Christian Haitian household, um, there's a lot not spoken as far as like individuals I know in my family who practice voodoo. Like we don't say that word, even though you may be seeing various aspects of that in the church. Specifically, when I went to visit Haiti for the first time, um, and there was something about voodoo that just like you that didn't resonate with me about in the sense of like that um, sort of African deities, in sort of put into sort of Christian, that just did not sit right for me. And so I have like a sort of altar and a sort of ancestor worship, and so I'm curious, what is it for you that sort of like, oh, kind of that's my jam, that really resonates for me. Like, do you remember, was there a moment, or was it like a series of moments, or a
Mm.
reading or a conversation, or just a sort of like a spiritual experience that really brought it home for you?
Yeah, I love this question. So, one of my mentors in the prison abolition movement, Esperanza Martel, is also a healer. And I started apprenticing with her and learning her healing methodology that is really dynamic and vast and fluid and integrates a variety of understandings from earth based practices, from First Nations, indigenous understandings of spirituality, from Reiki and color therapy and, you know, uh, what do you call these things? Aromatherapy and healing touch and all that. Actually, I have this book, Emotional Clearing by John Ruskin. It's right here. It's this
Okay.
one right there. Emotional Clearing by John Ruskin is the foundation of it. And emotional release work. And I apprenticed with her. And after that, she said, okay, now what are you gonna go learn? And I said, okay, it's time for me to go get more uh information about the in depth that I have been in this dance class my whole life, in this dance community, and been practicing this spiritual practice that I didn't really fully understand it. So I went and I learned about that, and I'm sort of in this journey of like, how do I become my full self? And I began also simultaneously organizing with Jews of color. And I was at a conference and I met this amazing woman called um, Yocheved Angelique. And we just connected immediately. And she was like, yo, I'm gonna be in this program called Kohenet. You should check it out. I think you will like it. And then, just so you know, so Kohenet only existed for 18 years and it closed in 2023. Uh,
I know, it
wait,
flies by,
23 or
doesn't it?
23 or 24, 23. Yeah. Anyways, so it only existed for 18 years. So it wasn't like something that was like super well known and is a newer movement. It's not like a rabbi. Everybody knows what a rabbi is, and you have lots of places to go get a rabbinical degree and all of this. It's really a new movement. And she said, you should check it out. I think you will like it. And that night I went home and I looked at it and I immediately applied for the program. Like I just knew. Like, oh, earth-based, feminist, Jewish sounds like exactly the path that I'm on. Like, how do I and this was with amazing women who were teaching Rabbi Jill Hammer and Taya Mashir, teaching about their wisdom and literally like literally reading between the lines in the Torah,
Mm-hmm.
and reinterpreting the Torah to be like, okay, well, you see this part right here where it says like, oh, the women were, sitting, the women were standing at the door gossiping. You see that line right there? Were they really gossiping? Because is that what you do when you go to a place of worship? You stand at the doorway and gossip? Like, let's unpack that. First of all, why would they stand at the doorway? What about the doorway was important? Why were they standing there? There's something sacred, right? What do we do at doorways? What do doorways represent?
Yeah.
What is the sacredness of keeping the keep tracking the entrance of people and the exit of people, of welcoming people into the space, of cleansing people, right? Of when you walk into a space that you get cleansed, that you get addressed, that you be welcome, that you have the tone set for you of what kind of place you're walking into.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there was sacred, important ritual happening at that doorway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's go back and reimagine what was that.
Yeah.
Let's remember.
Yeah.
Let's remember what was happening at that doorway.
Yeah.
And let's reclaim that. Let's reclaim the sacred practice of shrine keeping, right? So that's the kind of work that was happening in Kohenet that just felt so opposite to what my experience of Jewish religion had been. Um, had been just like anything that we don't tell you is not allowed. Women don't, this is your role and your place and you stay there and you don't get to read the Torah, you don't get to touch the Torah, you don't get to be in the same side, you don't get to lead prayers, it was all this stuff. And this was a space where like they were like, "Oh no, no. Women were written out of these stories
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we're going to write them back in."
Yeah. Yeah. That's powerful. That's really powerful. And I would imagine there's this opening that happens in sort of your sort of heart, your sort of just spirit that just sort of like, oh, the narrative that I've been told comes from a very sort of patriarchal lens,
Yeah.
and making that shift must have been very, I, I don't know, must have
Yeah.
been just very just mind blowing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, you don't have to walk around with a penis to like promote patriarchy, right? That is a thing that we are all doing. We are all participating in the patriarchy project. Like it is a very vast, very successful project that every single one of us is participating in. And so it really was the first time that I really was confronting myself around that because I see myself as, progressive, revolutionary. Like I'm like, yes, I'm a feminist and women's rights and, queer people and, forget gender. And, I'm trying to curb my words because I don't know what I'm allowed to say or not. But
Don't get me canceled with curse words.
like it's all of that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
for
yeah.
the first time, I was really confronted myself with the discomfort of touching a Torah scroll. Never in my life until then, right? Until 2019. No, yeah, until 2017. This was in 2000. So never until 2017 had I touched a Torah scroll. I was never taught to read the Torah in the proper sort of diction that and I had the opportunity to do so. And that was terrifying. I didn't want to. I was like, this is weird. I feel weird. I feel like this is not okay.
Right,
Like,
right, right.
like it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
undoing. What does this all mean for me that I was told I can't do this and not have the opportunity and I can?
yeah,
This is wild. Is this okay?
yeah, yeah. Like the Torah police were gonna come get you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. So it was a really magical time. And so much about my identity shifted
Yeah,
as a result. The way that I related to myself, the way that I related to in my relationships, across the board.
yeah,
There were lots of shifts of identity for me.
yeah.
And it was really beautiful.
Oh my gosh, Shoshana, I could keep on talking, but we're gonna have to wind down. And I want to say thank you so much for creating this space. If you haven't done a thumbs up, please do a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Shoshana, before we end, I guess the last question is, how would you mentor somebody who is looking to build community? Like what are some advice would you give to somebody who's looking at buying land or getting a group of people together and sort of starting that conversation and one or two, three things that you would advise folks in starting this journey?
Yeah. Um, there's nothing new. It has been done before. It is being done, and what you will do is new. And so look for the people that are already doing this thing as
Mm,
models and then riff off that. Um, Building a community takes practice, and it's really, really the the actual part of building a community. It sounds really fun and great and revolutionary and cool and all the things, but
are you gonna bust my bubble? Is this what you're gonna do?
100%. Honestly, it's like, are you up for having arguments about dirty dishes and like mold growing on food in the refrigerator? Like, are you up for that? Are you up for putting in a ton of energy into learning how to build communal systems that work that are different than what we've been given? Are you up for figuring out how to be in conflict and still love people and
Mm,
still be friends with people?
mm.
Because that's what community is. It's not like the cute, like, oh, we're just gonna own this land and frolic and have a good time and plant some seeds and grow some food. It's like actually like who's gonna go buy toilet paper tomorrow, and who's going to clean, and who's gonna facilitate this meeting. Those are the things that
Yeah.
it takes to build the community. So go to wherever you need to go, Spring Up, Aorta, Intentional Community Council. There's a ton of websites that have workbooks, workshops. Get some skills in facilitating, get some skills in conflict
Yeah.
resolution,
Yeah.
get some skills in decision making processes, get some skills in community structures, right? Like, how do you want to structure the community? How y'all gonna make decisions? How you gonna kick people out? How you gonna bring new people in?
Mm.
Those are things that are really hard. That's the harder part. The planting the seeds is the easy part. That's the easy part. Okay. That other stuff, that's the hard part. That's the part that takes a lot of work because we are not taught that.
Yeah.
We are taught to be scared of those things.
Yeah. 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 And I really appreciate what you said about like being in conflict doesn't necessarily mean that I stop loving you, right? I could. It's not just a matter of agreeing to disagree, but like I hear you and I honor you. I may disagree with you, but we have similar goals.
Hmm. Yeah, conflict. There's such good books on conflict. Um, and conflict is just, it's a fork in the road, and you have a choice
Yeah.
to walk away from the relationship or to dig your heels into the relationship.
Mm, I love that. I love that. And we're gonna end on that note. Shoshana, thank you so much for spending time with me. And I'm gonna have you back again because this was good because you dropped a whole bunch of nuggets that I wanted to pursue, but I was just like, oh, yes, say more. I love it. I love it. All right, folks, I'm gonna have Kabilio's information and Shoshana's information down below. If you want more information, yeah, follow Shoshana because she's awesome. She's awesome. See ya.
Thanks, Eshan.